Danny Rolling lived an unhappy life. A tortured soul since birth, Rolling, a.k.a. the Gainesville Ripper, passed on the horrifying abuse he had endured onto his victims. Over the course of 4 days in 1990, Rolling went on a rampage where he murdered 5 University of Florida students in a spree that terrified the nation. But despite huge media coverage, Danny Rolling was never actually caught for the murders. It was only when he was arrested for an unrelated burglary charge that he confessed to some of the most horrific murders in Florida's history, and was unmasked as the Gainesville Ripper. Then, a few short years later, the Gainesville murders became even more infamous when they helped inspire the classic horror movie, Scream. This is the grisly true story of Danny Rolling, the Gainesville Ripper. Danny Harold Rolling was born on May 26, 1954 to Claudia and James Rolling in Shreveport, Louisiana. Unfortunately for Danny, his father never wanted children, and he consistently abused his wife and kids. Danny was only 1 year old when his father abused him for the first time. He was beaten because he wasn't crawling properly. When Kevin, Danny's younger brother, was born in 1955, the abuse only worsened. At age 14, Danny's neighbors caught him peeping into their daughter's room. Of course, his father beat him for doing that. But Danny tried to stay in control, and he attended church and struggled to hold down steady work. He then enlisted in the military. Then the cycle of abuse continued. At age 23, after being with his wife for only 4 years, she separated from him after he threatened to kill her. Danny turned his devastation into anger and raped a woman who closely resembled his ex-wife. Later that year, he killed a woman in a car accident, which troubled him further. At 6'2", Danny Rolling was a massive, powerful man. From the late 70s to 1990s, Rolling committed a series of petty crimes and thefts. He turned to a series of armed robberies to get cash, and subsequently was in and out of the criminal justice systems in Louisiana, Mississippi, Georgia, and Alabama. He broke out of prison several times and was fired and quit jobs just as frequently. Meanwhile, the bodies of 3 victims were found in Shreveport: 24-year-old Julie Gruesome, her father Tom Gruesome, and her nephew, 8-year-old Sean, who were all killed around the time Danny lost his last job and returned home in vengeance. Danny Rolling broke in May of 1990. He shot his 58-year-old father twice and nearly killed him. Though he survived, James Rolling had lost an eye and an ear. Danny then changed his identity with papers he stole after breaking into someone's house. He fled Shreveport and took a bus to Sarasota, Florida, to start a new life as Michael Kennedy Jr. in late July of 1990. But running away to Florida didn't cure Danny. It made him worse. On August 24, 1990, Danny broke into the home of Sonia Larson and Christina Powell, both incoming freshmen at the University of Florida in Gainesville. Rolling followed them home, broke into their house, and simply overpowered them. Thus began the streak of the Gainesville Ripper. Rolling covered both of the young women's mouths with duct tape before he bound their hands. He forced one young woman to perform oral sex on him before he raped, stabbed, and killed her. He returned to Sonia's dead body and raped her again. Rolling went so far as to cut off the girl's nipples and keep one as a grisly trophy of his actions. The next day, Rolling killed Christina Hoyt in much the same fashion. He broke into her residence, and after he raped her, he removed her nipples and placed them beside her. Rolling cut off her head and sat her upright on the edge of her bed. The Gainesville Ripper put her head on the bookshelf. By now, news of the murders had spread across the university. Authorities put out as much information as they could to try and catch the suspect, and students slept in groups and took every precaution they could think of. Despite this, the Gainesville Ripper killed one more time. On August 27th, Rolling attacked Tracy Powells and Manuel Taboada, both 23. He killed Taboada while he slept. Then he killed Tracy. Authorities feel Rolling did not manage to mutilate these bodies because he may have been in danger of getting caught, or was otherwise interrupted. These murders all occurred less than 2 miles from each other around the University of Florida. The university consequently canceled classes for an entire week. Students brought baseball bats with them everywhere they went, and no one went out alone during the day or night. Students triple locked their doors, and some even slept in shifts so that someone was awake at all times. By the end of August, thousands of students left campus, and around 700 never came back because they feared for their lives. Danny Rolling's father, who was a 20-year veteran cop of the Shreveport Police Department, had not only taught his son how to take abuse all of his life, but he also taught Danny how to cover his tracks. Police couldn't find enough evidence at crime scenes to implicate Danny Rolling. Instead of leaving the duct tape on his dead bodies, Danny disposed of it in dumpsters to get rid of any fingerprints. Danny also used cleaning solvents on the dead body to remove any traces of semen. Some of the female bodies were left in sexually suggestive positions, which offered authorities a clue into the killer's method. The Gainesville Ripper continued to steal from homes and gas stations until he was finally caught in Ocala after a high-speed chase. He was wanted for the robbery of a Winn-Dixie, as authorities still did not know that he was the Gainesville Ripper. That was on September 8th, 2 weeks following the murders. The triple murder in Shreveport of Julie Gruesome, her father, and nephew clued the Gainesville police into their suspect. Gruesome's corpse was left in a sexual position. She also was stabbed to death. It wasn't until January of 1991, more than 4 months after the murders, that police finally caught their break. Because of the similarities of the murders in Shreveport and Gainesville, investigators sought DNA of prisoners from Shreveport who had been incarcerated. Danny Rolling's DNA was similar enough to DNA left at the Gainesville murder scenes to charge him with murder. Rolling confessed to being the Gainesville Ripper. Prosecutors found enough evidence to convict him, and he was subsequently executed on October 25, 2006, in Florida. A total of 47 people witnessed the execution of the Gainesville Ripper, which is double the capacity of the viewing room. Rolling's last meal consisted of lobster tail served with drawn butter, butterfly shrimp with a cocktail sauce, a baked potato with sour cream and butter, strawberry cheesecake, and a glass of sweet tea. On Rolling's deathbed, the 52-year-old sang a hymn-type song that rambled on for 5 verses. He called on the tunes of his childhood when he learned how to play guitar and find peace before his execution.